Because in the news, there have been some things about our flag. I want to just tell you a story. I wrote about this in our, we do Bible conferences, we do Israel and Bible trips and things to Grand Canyon and all, and we also write things for the internet and for our internet communication. We have our Good Morning Lord Bible studies, and we have our what we call our e-news. And this was an article I wrote, some of you may remember it, on our e-news, and just recently we had a situation across America that's been catching a lot of attention about the flag. So I thought, I'm going to read this thing and kind of set the stage tonight for the national anthem. So, in the War of 1812, America was again fighting for her mother country, Great Britain. Britain had lost the American War of Independence in 1783, but now, 29 years later, she was determined to take America back as a British possession. In Europe, Napoleon had been defeated, and all the seasoned British troops were sent en masse to the United States in order to take back the land and its rich tax base. The initial battles were fought in the north and in and around the Canadian border, but in August 1814, the British invaded Washington, D.C., burning and looting the White House, the Capitol, the Treasury, the War Department, the Naval Yard. President James Madison and the entire U.S. government had to flee the city and eventually ended up hiding in Maryland. American troops were demoralized and were easily defeated in successive battles around the Washington area. The British spent several days looting tons of merchandise from the city merchants. It was a dark, pivotal moment for the new republic. Our capital in Washington was destroyed, our government leaders on the run, and our troops in disarray. The British turned their sights to Baltimore for a knockout blow. The British believed victory was at hand. On September 12, 1814, 5,000 British troops headed by land from Washington to Baltimore, only 35 miles away. They met a meager 3,000 American troops about 5 miles outside of Baltimore. The Americans engaged the British in battle, but retreated as a stalling tactic to allow time for more American troops to arrive. At the same time, a large flotilla from the British Royal Navy was sailing through the Chesapeake Bay to attack from the water. At this point in the war, the British had captured prisoners from the previous battles and held them on a ship offshore from Fort McHenry, a small defensive fort guarding the entrance to the Baltimore harbor. The Americans initiated a meeting to negotiate the release of these prisoners. By rowboat, they sent a young lawyer from Baltimore out to the ship where the prisoners were held in order to arrange a prisoner swap. The lawyer eventually reached an agreement that the prisoners could be exchanged on a one-for-one basis. He was then allowed to go below deck to tell the men that he had negotiated their release. The cargo hold was packed tightly with American prisoners in chains. The lawyer told them, "Tonight I've arranged for your release. Tomorrow morning you will be free." When he returned topside, the British admiral, who overheard the declaration to the prisoners, said, quote, "We'll honor your commitment to release the prisoners to these men, but after tonight it won't matter, because 85 warships of the British Royal Navy are on their way here and will arrive in 2 or 3 hours. By tomorrow morning, the war will be over." From the ship, using a telescope, the lawyer could see the massive fleet sailing up Chesapeake Bay toward the tiny fort, and prospects of repelling such an onslaught were grim, to say the least. At Fort McHenry, the only port defense for Baltimore, the Americans had proudly hoisted the American flag with 13 stars and stripes over the fort's rampart. The admiral explained to the lawyer, "We're given an ultimatum that the Americans lay down their arms and take the flag, or we're going to take out the fort where the flag stands. We will level it." The lawyer immediately protested because he knew the fort was not only a military fort, but it also housed women and children. The British admiral answered, "It's okay. We've left them a way of escape. They know that all they have to do is lower the flag, and we'll know they've surrendered. We'll stop shelling immediately once you surrender. You'll be under British rule again, and this war will be over." The lawyer went back down to the prisoners in the hold on the ship and told the prisoners what was about to take place. The men in the hold asking to go back up on the top and to communicate down a running account of what was happening. And he did. The British fleet arrived as the twilight began to fall. There was a haze over the water, typical of the sunsets in Baltimore. The Brits maneuvered their ships into position, and they began to relentlessly shell the small fort with the large American flag, unleashing their cannons on the helpless occupants. The lawyer recounted later that the explosive sounds from the British cannons were so deafening you couldn't even hear to talk. There was almost no pause from the massive cannon fire as the ships moved one after another into position to fire everything they had at the fort. The sky was pitch black, but it was lit up by the yellow and red bursting bombs. Below deck, men were there, and any pause in the bombing, the prisoners hollered up to the attorney, "Tell us if the flag is still flying over the ramparts." Every time a bomb would explode near the flag, you could see the flag, and the lawyer would holler down to the prisoners that the flag was still there. I have to keep myself together. I'm not a professional speaker. Okay. Am I keeping up with this? We doing okay? Okay. The admiral came to the lawyer and said, "Your people are insane. What's the matter with them? Don't they understand we'll not stop until the flag is down, even if we have to kill every soul?" The lawyer responded by quoting George Washington, "The thing that sets an American Christian apart from all other people in the world is that he will die standing before he will live on his knees." The British could see that the flag had taken several direct hits but was still standing. So for the next 3 hours, the admiral directed all the cannon fire to focus on the rampart where the huge flag stood in order to take it down. Between the bombing, the sounds of the cannon firing, the lawyer could hear the men below praying. The massive shelling continued through the night. When the sunrise came, the lawyer wondered if the flag would still be flying over the fort. There was a heavy mist over the water and the fort in the distance, and in the morning light, as it enveloped the area, even though the flagpole itself listed heavily and was shredded, it was still flying proudly. The lawyer went immediately to the fort to see what happened. What he found was that each time the flag took a hit, men would run out, push it back up, and even though they risked sure death from the cannon barrage, they continued through the night. Scores of men died holding up that flag. Each time they were killed, more took their place. By morning, the only thing holding up the flagpole was the bodies of the dead men stacked there. In the end, the British concluded the fort could not be breached. And the moving ships, and they couldn't move past it to attack Baltimore. Our American ground troops, inspired by those giving up their lives from the onslaught of the British cannons, won a decisive victory, and Baltimore was saved. The British were also dealing with the fact that American citizens were heavily armed and therefore unmanageable. Since the British troops wore red and walked in a straight line, they made easy targets for a well-armed nation who had sense enough to shoot from behind trees and rocks. It was a turning point in the War of 1812. America has never since been at risk of being conquered by an invasive army. The lawyer was so moved by those men, he wrote a poem. He called it "In Defense of Fort Henry." And the poem you know today, of course, is our national anthem. And I'm going to point out something really interesting, that how he wrote that. The last sentence ended, "Home of the Brave," with a question mark. Fascinating. Because, is it the home of the brave? And then the second verse that we never see and you never hear about is this. It talks about God and his power and his might, and that the Star-Spangled Banner, the flag, will wave over the land, home of the brave, with a exclamation mark. Notice that it's often been said that freedom is not free. And through the history of this country, we've paid for this freedom with the blood of our countrymen. And 2 million people have died in uniform defending this country. So I say we stand up and sing the national anthem.
Twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous sky, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red